IVM.
Sustainability has grown as a focus area for many of us. Not just as a thing we do from time to time, but a definitive way of living our lives going ahead. This has been further amplified by communities and companies that have helped share relevant information and accelerate this shift in lifestyle. One such company driving this mindset forward has been the Better India, which has grown from a hyper-engaged community to being a growing social commerce platform through its product range in the Better Home. And I have their founder and CEO, Dhimant Parekh, on the show today to not just talk about sustainability and social commerce, but to also understand from him the deeper insight into building engaged communities. I'm Varun, the co-founder and corner chief at The Glitch. We're right back with Advertising is Dead.
Have you ever wondered how successful people do their thing? How do they navigate the challenges they often face? Are you wondering about the future of restaurants, film, education, technology, and everything else in between? Hi, I'm Gauri Devidayal, best known for being one of the brains behind The Table, an award-winning restaurant in Bombay. One thing my life as a restaurateur has given me is the opportunity to meet with some truly inspiring people, most often just by chatting with strangers at the community table. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about learning the new dimensions of business and understanding how different people swim this sea. It's an opportunity for me to pick their brains and ask them all the questions on my mind, whether it's about learning from their past experiences or talking about future trends. Through their journeys, stories, and insights, I hope you too, like me, will come away inspired and energized. So come, join me every Wednesday with your favorite drink because this round is on me.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're with Dhimant. Hi Dhimant, welcome to the show.
Hi Varun, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You know, when I first got in touch with you to do this and when we touched base, one of the things that excited me a lot about the conversation I wanted to have with you was the fact that, you know, we always hear broad strokes conversations around words like sustainability, we talk about social commerce, all that stuff. But I thought it was important for us, especially in times like these, to have a deeper conversation about how all of this kind of can work and what people can actually do and how you kind of built out the Better India. And so I want to kind of start off with asking you what pulled you towards this side of, how to put it, I wouldn't even call it a business, but what pulled you towards sustainability in as a space?
That's a good question, right? Considering I come from largely a technology background, and been part of this whole startups building on the internet over the last 10 years. One thing that kind of emerged for me as a question was really in terms of we were seeing all these businesses kind of mushroom up, like travel, e-commerce, all of this stuff. And one thing that my co-founder and I were always kind of thinking about is that how could you really leverage the internet, build large communities, and really drive towards certain impactful causes, right? Sustainability being one of the big ones for us, because if you just look around our cities now, right, like the leapfrogging in consumption has been phenomenal. So a lot of the lifestyles have changed, where people are now using single-use plastic and all of this. And what has not happened is that the entire infrastructure from the government side, from our city infrastructure, in order to manage that waste and garbage has not kept up. So there's a big gap. And the more we kind of think about it, we realize that this is not going to be a long-term game at all. Like, we're not going to be able to sustain our cities. And the kind of impact and degradation that's going to happen to our, environment is going to be huge. So we decided that, okay, let's start actually creating awareness about this, which is what led to the Better India, where we started writing about, not just from a perspective of highlighting the problems, right? Because that we decided that that's not a model that works. Because the moment you kind of bombard people with problems, then people switch off eventually. But we said that, okay, let's start documenting solutions that are working across the country by common citizens, by small organizations, and so on. And we ended up building a community of people who are kind of inclined towards action, inclined towards social consciousness, and so on. And that's what really led to the Better India. And of course, as we started seeing the traction, we then realized that one key thing missing is the presence of a brand which which gives access to these consumers of products which are sustainable, right? And that's what led to then us launching the Better Home, which is basically our range of eco-friendly home cleaners.
Yeah.
So that in a very sort of a quick summary is how we got here.
One of the questions which a lot of people kind of think about it, and I think you hit upon that right now with what you were saying, is the fact that everybody wants to focus on having a more sustainable lifestyle. I think that's something which most of us are aware of and want to do. Like I have friends who very clearly turn around to any of us if we ever have single-use plastic or are using something that is that is not necessarily something that is sustainable, that is good for the environment. But I think we all find it tough to find the products and to find them in the same level of convenience that you would find all other products, right?
Yeah.
And that gap for me has always been interesting because it's always been the fact that, okay, do I need to I want to make the effort, but I don't know how much I'll have to change the way I live to do that. Do you feel that that's what would almost be the essence of one of the stronger pillars of the community building aspect?
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly point out, see the mental block of how much do I need to change myself in order to lead a sustainable lifestyle? I think it has got established over the many years, right? That people who want to lead a sustainable lifestyle need to necessarily go through a lot of inconveniences, which is actually not the case. Even if you just look at 2 decades ago, how we all lived, like when we grew up at homes, it's not like we had single-use plastic bags coming from supermarkets. No, we used to anyway carry our, we used to get them in paper, sort of recycled newspaper bags, which the local grocer would have it, or we would carry our bags and get it, and almost everything was recycled or upcycled or used to the maximum extent. And we're not even talking about like a generation ago. We're just talking about like 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not. So I don't think that there is any inconvenience per se, but I think it's more of a mental block, more of a mental block and a habit change. No doubt, single-use stuff makes it easy, right? I mean, you can open that chips packet and eat it instead of actually going down to the nearby store which makes them and go with your dabba and get it. Of course, there is that sort of convenience. But then what we're not realizing is we're trading off short-term gains for the long-term impact. And that is something that people need to start realizing.
Another aspect of, when you look at the broader community building, right, that's how we kind of started off the whole aspect of it. Were there any pre-thoughts that you had, preconceived notions that what you assumed the community would really want to focus on and what it ended up being? And would you say that there were there aspects like that?
Yeah, definitely. Man. So initially, I never thought that if you just put content out there, the assumption was that people would read the content and there would be awareness created, and that was really where we thought it would stop.
Yeah.
But what we realized was a very big change actually. Is that people would not only consume the content that we would put out, but people would then go and even contact the protagonist who we've written about, help that person scale, and some people would replicate the idea in their own neighborhoods and communities. So going beyond just consumption, people actually started taking action, and we effectively became like a catalyst or an enabler of all this impact. Right? To me, that was definitely a revelation. We didn't assume that that would happen, and that was very, very amazing to see. And since then, of course, there have been thousands of case studies of impact that have happened purely by this community when we've given them access to information. So I would say that was a big revelation.
And that also drives an important point. That is the fact that if you build a community by not necessarily just giving them information, but you actually letting them be a part of the process and they actually add something to it, it then becomes something that's a lot more personal to them. And I think like brands today try so hard to kind of have that kind of a relationship, but you in some senses have actually been able to build it out with that, it's authentic to the person, it connects to their deeper values, and they're in essence empowering the larger brand and the larger community as well just by doing this.
Yeah. No doubt about that. See what it also does, if you're looking at purely from a brand building perspective, you are no longer coming across as this corporate who is, listing out his or her values out there and letting a consumer decide whether they should, engage with you or not. You're basically saying that, hey, we'll build this together as a brand, right? And the more you allow your audience or community to work with you in building that journey, the more loyalty and stickiness you end up building, which is effectively what happened with the Better India, where almost every story would have people involvement from the readers, and then that actually helped shape and create a very, very loyal audience for us. So yeah, I think building with the community is the thing now. I mean, and the internet makes it so much easier to do that.
That's true. If you want to kind of chart out how that growth happened, if you look at stages, right? You obviously start off with an editorial focus, then kind of moving towards what you have as stories per se, and then obviously then the product. If you kind of look at that entire journey of things, would there be specific points that you'd want to talk about, which I'm sure will give people insight into where you made those shifts when you took those calls, specifically to move into those directions?
Yeah. So like I said, initially the idea was always, how do you build a strong community, right? That was a big one. Now we realized that the best way to do that would be through the power of storytelling. So, when you put out stories, people like it, and people with common values and common likes would come together and then form a community. That was the hypothesis.
Yeah.
So when we started this as a side project. So it was more a weekend project that my co-founder and wife Anuradha and I would go around in Bangalore, documenting stories of different people trying to solve different social and environmental problems, and we'd just put that up in a blog, right? And then slowly. And of course, we would force this blog on our friends and family network to get them to read. But slowly what happened is that, the people outside that friends and family circle started reading this, or they came across it. And then more and more people started sharing it, because that at that point, at least, there was nobody focusing on writing about what's working in the country. What are the grassroots level ideas and innovations and stuff? None of that stuff was working. So we saw that the readership kind of started increasing, but more importantly, we started getting mails from people on how some story made a transformation in their life, or how someone else got in touch and helped them scale, and so on, right? So all this constant feedback kept coming in. So we knew that we were at least on the track of building the right kind of community. Now the other challenge became that, and that time, we used to write we used to put out one story in a week, and suddenly more and more people are reading, and they're like, hey, why don't you do more? And we didn't know how to do more because we had our day jobs and stuff. So then, very interestingly, there was this journalist from a mainstream newspaper in Delhi. She got in touch and she said, I have tons of such stories of innovations and ideas and stuff at the grassroots level, but my paper would not carry because they fundamentally believe, there's nobody who wants to read this. So could I contribute to you guys? And we said, sure. And so, she came on board. Then slowly someone was, the next we knew someone doing water conservation in Rajasthan. And they had great ideas and interventions that were working, and they wanted these ideas to be known to the public at large. And so they said, could we kind of, share these ideas on your platform? And we said, yeah. Then there was someone working with animal conservation in Assam, someone working with farmers in Maharashtra. And slowly, I think in a period of 3 years, we ended up having a network of over 50 people who were actually working on the grassroots level, in various remote corners of the country. And they really became our eyes and ears on the ground. And for them, it was a win-win thing, because for them, it was basically having their ideas go out to the people at large, and have others, replicate these solutions. Because fundamentally, these were not writers by profession; they were actually working at the grassroots level, scientists and people working on environmental issues, social issues, and so on. So that's how it became a sort of a symbiotic network that we built. And so that network kind of quickly grew, and that helped us get more content. And eventually, of course, we were able to then hire people, and now we have a larger sort of a team which is sourcing and documenting all of this stuff. But that was really how we we grew, that whole network. And once we hit a certain scale, then everything starts kicking in, right? Your readers start sending you pointers in terms of, hey, this is happening in our neighborhood. Then you have partner. So then we started partnering with institutions, and institutions would share about what's going on in their sectors. So that's how we really grew. And then in 2018 or 2019, I think, we started seeing that the conversation really peaked around sustainability, and also about what kind of products people are using in their homes, and what is the impact they have on the environment, and what is the impact these products have on themselves, right? And then fast forward to the COVID days, you're starting to see the conversation be a lot about health and immunity. And the long-term damage of harsh chemicals coming into your floor cleaners, toilet cleaners, all of that, and how they compromise your immunity. And that's really where the Better Home kind of made an appearance. We launched in Feb this year, and it's been phenomenal to see the response, and the fact that a lot more people want this is conveyed in the fact that in the last 5 months of our existence, we've actually shipped to over 360 unique cities and towns and villages of India. So it's not just the urban, top 10 metros, which is kind of talking about these things. It's way beyond.
And I remember when we spoke, we did a pre-conversation before this recording, and I remember you telling me that, and I was reading up what you said. You actually have a background which has had a lot of focus on commerce, right? Commerce as an aspect. But what is interesting, you started with something you were passionate about, and once that kind of scaled up, you plugged in the experience that you had on the commerce side. So for me, it's actually a very best trajectory to kind of build something up. You're not necessarily starting, commerce is where your background has been. So build it with that first and then add the community later. So the flip for me, by the time you got to this point, also a bit of a throwback to your earlier career in terms of what all you've done and how that kind of fed into this, which aspects were newer learnings on the commerce side of things.
That's a very good question, right? And so post business school, this is way back in 2007. I joined a internet startup back then, which was trying to build stuff in the social networking space and travel space. So I got a sense of how massive the internet is and how it levels the field in terms of anybody could be a distributor of anything, right? Basically. But the key insight I got there was that you need to be able to talk to your customers directly on the internet. And you need to build a community for that. And based on the community that you have, you can then build a lot of other verticals, like business verticals on top of that. So post, the working in that startup, when I moved into a mobile commerce company, I realized that the tough part is not to sell, right? The tough part is actually to get an audience who believes in you to buy. And so, we had a mobile commerce thing. And post that, I was part of a founding team of an e-commerce venture where we were selling baby products. And at the baby products thing, that was the key insight that I got, that we actually realized that a lot of new parents don't exactly know what they need to buy. And then as a child grows, they don't even know what toys to buy or what books to buy, because there isn't enough literature around all of that. At that point, I'm talking about 2000.
And also a lot of it was international. I mean, we have a 3-year-old and I agree with you 100% because a lot of the stuff you would get would be international and not necessarily Indian focus. So you'd end up having to try and figure out what was available here. So I agree with you on that 100%.
Exactly. And you're saying this now, right? And I'm talking about like 2010, like almost 10 years ago. There wasn't. And so we started a blog. We started a content platform educating people, educating new parents based on different stages of their kid in terms of what are the books they should be reading. We went to real depths like what's a toy, and if you're buying this particular toy, what are the skills, like a motor skill or a social skill, which would get developed and so on. So we really started doing that, and we saw there was a big jump in the brand retention, in the loyalty and the retention. When someone would have read our blog and then come to buy us, we saw that stickiness. And I realized that really that's the core, because look, everybody's selling everything and there's no differentiator. But the moment you start giving knowledge and information to a customer, that's when you can actually win a customer's loyalty and attention. Which is the whole philosophy we took with the Better India. We decided that we should build a community first, and really build a very thriving community. And once that is done, you can then come in and solve for specific problems that that community has. And that is the key part for us, which is, as of now, is the Better Home, where we've realized that the community wants to adopt sustainable practices, but there isn't a single brand out there which can help you get started.
If you had to, looking at the larger brand ecosystem, right? What would you say are learnings that, like, a brand today that wants to almost build their own ecosystems in that sense? What would you say are learnings on your end in terms of what, let's say, if you are let's say a direct-to-consumer brand, or even if you are a brand which is between brick and mortar as well as this, what would you say your learnings have been? Which brand should we look at to understand the consumer today? Because obviously the consumer today has evolved in terms of thought process, and a lot of these kind of show with the growth that you've had. What do you feel what are the learnings over there?
See, for a D2C brand, right? I think the key part is to build it with the community, build it alongside the community. Okay. And that basically means that it's not just about content. It's about creating platforms where your customers can come and directly interact with you. And by that, I don't mean your customer care, basically. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not the level of interaction that your customer should be able to get with you. But they should be able to directly talk to any of the folks in your company, reach out to you, give you suggestions, tell you feedback on your product. And you should be able to constantly have those interactions with them and build your vision along with the customer. I know a lot of people say, hey, the customer doesn't know what they want and stuff like that, but I think that's a real sort of an outlier philosophy. It works for less than 1% of the people. But majority of the cases, it's a much better, safer bet to build it out around communities. Now, as a direct-to-consumer brand, what is community, right? Effectively, if you just look around, most brands would then resort to saying, okay, I need an Instagram page or I need a Facebook page, and I'm going to start, putting good images there, and the community will happen. I think that's not going to happen, right? We all know that no matter how much content you put out there, if it's not really connecting with your audience, if it's not adding value to your audience, you're not going to build a community. So one is, of course, figuring out how to get that community. And I'll tell you what we do, for instance. Every person who subscribes to the Better Home gets actually added into this closed WhatsApp group that we have. And it's basically become this wonderful forum to discuss everything around sustainability and sustainable living. So you have people sharing, DIY soap that they are making using soap nuts. People are sharing where they rent their clothes from because they want to kind of go the other way and not buy clothing. And it's fascinating to see this whole ecosystem grow, where we don't plug our brand in. We don't. You're a part of this group, and we strongly encourage everyone to just talk about their ways of sustainable living, and that becomes a very sort of a strong messaging to our community, where you're not a brand. You're basically a bunch of people. We have a bunch of folks, including me, being a part of that group. So you're no longer just a brand with a logo, right? You're actually people who they can talk to. They can discuss, and they can actually share feedback, saying that, hey, I really love the packaging with which you guys sent and stuff. And we're able to have a conversation, and it's very, very informal. So you've broken the barrier between a brand and your customer. And I think that's the future. The internet is going to facilitate more and more of these interactions, and I think the brands which would succeed are those which really embrace this, as compared to having a very conventional view of how a brand should be.
Have you just in terms of your interactions with other brands who also want to be, want to kind of plug into your community as well? How has that been, and what are the kind of necessary filters that you look at? Because that will be very important, because there are many brands who turn around and say, there are obviously global examples of that. Whether you're a clothing brand, whether you're anything else, saying, okay, we are entirely sustainable, but the reality would be that, you obviously have, it's more surface level. It's not necessarily a full-fledged try. So what kind of filters do you kind of apply? How does that process kind of work with you?
So look, we haven't engaged with other brands
Yeah,
in order to getting them to our community. Yeah, no, we haven't.
but
We largely
reached
focus
out to
on
you
our
in a
own.
sense, would you say that?
They have, yeah. I mean, folks have reached out, but the challenge really is that the moment you kind of endorse another brand and put them in front of your community, you are basically taking that responsibility. That hey, I'm getting this brand in front of you, and I endorse them, and I know for a fact that they are completely aligned with our value system. Now we can't because we can't say that for sure. We don't do it, right? Unless, and hence we only talk about the community being endorsed by us from our brand perspective and not any third party. Because as you rightly said, right, there is, it's going to be very hard to verify a lot of claims, so we don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you that question also because the attempt to, so there is this need that consumers have today to say that okay, we want it to not just be surface level, that we want it to be deeper because we demand that from you as a brand, and many brands try to take the shortcut out. And I want to understand how that would play out with you. I think it makes sense that you would keep it, keep that part away from it. But you have obviously built out a subscription business and many others around that. Right?
Yeah.
Which also, I'm a huge believer in subscriptions, although I don't do enough of those in the product space. But I do believe that there is a genuine future in that in terms of how. We look at not from a convenience standpoint, but also from a sampling, etc. standpoint. So I want to pick your brain on that a little bit in terms of your perspective on subscriptions and how that part kind of has evolved for you.
So we were very clear that we wanted to build something around subscription. Now, if you look at it, subscription doesn't lend itself to every product category, right? So a lot of companies we've seen have tried subscription in the clothing space. Like, every month you'll get a pair of jeans or pair of socks or stuff like that, and then there are subscription models around food and so on. So we realized that subscription could lend itself to a product which fits these two broad parameters. Okay, one is that it's an essential, so it has to be an essential. It's a essential that you definitely need in every household. The second is that the decision making on that product should not be revisited by a customer very often. Okay, so for instance, you're not really thinking about what brand of toilet cleaner you're buying. Once you've made a decision that this is the one I'm buying, right? You're not revisiting that decision every month.
No.
Right. So when you club these two, they lend very well for a subscription model. So now we got into home cleaners. All we had to make sure is that the first time that a customer sees us and reads us, makes a call that they want this, and once they've done that, they're not revisiting that, because it's a no-brainer, right? It's not like whether you want to eat a chocolate ice cream or a vanilla ice cream, which is an actual conscious decision you need to make, but not so much here. So it lends itself to that model, and it's been amazing to see that 75% of the purchases on our site are on subscription, which is really large, and people.
Sorry, finish what you're saying. I'll come back.
No. So what I'm saying is that the fact that people come in, opt for it, and then month after month they're just continuing to have the subscription on is a great thing to see, because that's really where we believe we've cracked the product market fit there.
What I was coming to was, do you also then see that from you're obviously then basis have data in terms of what people. Someone who buys X kind of product would also want Y, etc. How long do they stick onto the same one? Would you see in the future, and then you don't have to tell me if you don't want to tell me, do you see sampling and a bunch of those as well as a strong part of this in terms of, okay, there's a newer product here, this person's, just on the clean on the home cleaner space, right? You might have a product that's aligned to that. Okay, this genuinely has had a subscription for a long time, so then stuff like sampling kind of comes in. There is also like deep data for you to understand that consumer a lot more, right? When one is the community part and where you have that insight, but then this obviously would also drive a lot of that insight as well.
Absolutely. So we for instance, right, we realized from the data of people buying dishwashing, we realized that if they're actually using dishwashing and if they are concerned about the eco-friendliness and all of that, what about the scrubber that you use for dishwashing, right? And we thought, okay, this is a very interesting thing, and could there be something there? We researched and we found that there are a few companies who make scrubbers out of coconut husk. So as biodegradable as you can ever get, right? It's just husk basically wound together. And we quickly then had this hypothesis that people would want this, and then we just put it up on our user community, and everybody said, yes, we definitely want this. So then we decided, okay, fine. The month of August, in fact, I think this month, and for the next 30 days, we are shipping our kits with those scrubbers for free for people to try it out and get user feedback. And the moment that happens, it will then become a part of our catalog. So
I
exactly.
I told you I mentioned something before you actually announced it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was very prophetic from your side.
When you mentioned dishwashing and scrubber, obviously that is something people done a lot more of themselves during this entire period of lockdown, right? Yeah. One of the questions which, and I remember this is the first thing I asked you when you were doing a pre-conversation as well, is that has the focus on sustainability moved away? Because now for instance, if you're going somewhere, you are using, let's say, a disposable mask, whereas most of us have moved to cloths in that sense. But there are many pieces which you would normally focus on sustainability. Now you're focusing on safety. Do you see some sort of a downside on some aspects of sustainability while some stay intact? Do you see that being? Has it kind of taken us a couple of steps back?
That's a very good question. So there are two parts to this, right? One is that there is a immediate short-term impact on the environment. So you're starting to see more and more people discarding, your single-use gloves, your PPE kits, your masks. They're all over the place. We're starting to see pictures of masks appearing in oceans and stuff like that. So I think that's the big downside of the pandemic and how that's panning out. On the other hand, what we are seeing is that conversations around health and immunity have shot up. So people really, really are now concerned about everything that they consume, whether on themselves or in their homes. What is that doing to their immunity levels? And so it's reflective in the fact that people are opting for healthier alternatives. And it obviously shows in our sort of graph as well that since the pandemic actually started, we've seen a huge rise in people opting for eco-friendly, non-toxic cleaning products from us. And I think that boils down to the whole immunity conversation, right? Really, what are we building for in the long run? So people are kind of thinking long term as well, and that's evident in terms of the choices that are being made now.
Would you then also kind of turn around and say that, and I'm kind of rounding up the entire conversation we've had, right? Is that because a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are young, who just kind of want to start off their careers, and I know a lot of them are. I mean, especially, and I think this is a generation that really believes in sustainability as a core focus, as a core value chain. If I want to, let's say, okay, I want to have a career where I want to make this a continued aspect of what I do, be it working in social commerce, be it working in sustainability. What do you see as the opportunities for someone who's kind of just starting off to kind of work in this space right now, or in terms of just career? But also, if I do take that choice, what would your pointers be as to how to do it right? In the sense that at some point there's that line between there is passion on one end, and there is the work, and if the line goes one way or the other, sometimes you go one side of the line or the other, the chances of you either not focusing on the other side or this side becomes much larger. So I thought these two parts I'd love to hear your pointers on.
So the short answer is come join us. The longer answer is that if you are actually thinking about building this, the myth that impact and business have to kind of go separate ways, I think is not right. You can basically have business models in which sustainability is intertwined to your business model, right? And I'll cite our own sort of business model as an example. The Better Home products, the Better Home is essentially a D2C FMCG product, right? We sell online It's e-commerce. You have commissions. You make your money based on the product selling. It's a fundamental e-commerce business.
Yeah.
However, the caveat though, the constraint though, is that the product that we sell is made from and as per certain eco-friendly, environment-friendly practices, and the product is great for the environment even when it goes out into the into the sewage system and the water body. So it's not just at the product level. Now, what have we done at a sort of at a larger ecosystem level, right? So our subscription model, we really gave it a lot of thought in terms of saying how could you build it at a very sort of a circular economy level, right? So when you actually subscribe to our kit, your first kit comes in plastic bottles, which are meant for long-term reuse. Your second kit comes in refill pouches. And your second kit also comes with a self-addressed envelope in which you can put your refill pouches after you use them and send it back to us. And we work with a recycling organization who recycles these into other products. So that way, we are basically preventing even a single bottle of plastic from entering the landfill.
Yeah.
Now, this is baked into our model, right? So now the more the business grows, massive the impact will be. And you no longer have to decide, hey, should I go the business route or the impact route? Which is why my point always is that make sure that impact and business and sustainability and business are intertwined right when you design your business model, because then you won't have to worry. You just have to focus on growing the business and impact will follow suit.
And not treat them like they're in separate silos in that sense.
Exactly. Because the moment you treat them as separate silos, it's a recipe for disaster. Then you really don't know which direction to go. And you constantly have this decision to be made. Is this good for me or is this good for the environment? And, you'll always be conflict ridden.
No, that makes total sense, right? Not to treat them as two separate pieces, but have it almost at the foundational level, have them intertwined, and then kind of build it up from there. I think that makes total sense. Towards the end of every episode, I do this segment called Humans of Advertising, and I ask a bunch of random questions, just to kind of go beyond what we just spoken about. So I will fire away.
Sure.
What is the one thing that you are a huge consumer of or huge fan of that people who might know you professionally might be surprised to know that you're into that? What would that be?
I read a lot of material and books on quantum physics, and I don't think a lot of people who know me professionally would know that.
Yeah,
but that's really a very big subject matter.
That was an interesting you gone sustainability to quantum physics. So you basically you're saying, okay, fair enough, if we can't make it sustainable on Earth, so in case there ever is a requirement to God, I understand quantum physics. So space travel is still in your thought process in that sense of the word.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. But yeah, I've just been a big fan of the subject ever since college, and I continue to read a lot around that.
What can you put together in an instant?
A website.
Wow, I've asked this question 91 times. This is the 92nd time I asked this question. Nobody's ever said a website, so you are the first person. Would you have any recent things that you've read, watched, maybe in terms of books, or maybe listen to, or a podcast that you listen to, or something that you watch that you feel that you want to recommend? Just something that people should kind of also consume?
So I've been a big consumer of podcasts, especially the last 2-3 years. And so whenever I'm running long distance, I'm listening to podcasts. And one podcast which has really stood out for me is Radio Lab. I think it's amazing the kind of topics and the kind of completely disparate topics that they pick in their episodes, and the way they go deeper into those is just phenomenal. And I'm just blown away every time I listen to Radio Lab. So I would definitely recommend that podcast.
And as I kind of wind this up, while my regular question always is why will advertising not die, my question to you is going to be why is sustainability not going to die? Why is the focus on sustainability not going to die, rather?
Look, because the choice is very clear. If you let sustainability die, I think your planet is going to die. And I don't think that's an option for anybody. Maybe it's not in the immediate radar of people now, but it's out there. So either you let sustainability die and let your planet die, or you do something about sustainability. So I think the choice is very clear. It's a choice of survival for all of us.
Yeah. I mean, as obvious as that point is, but most times people don't think about it, right? Which is why I thought it's important to kind of end off with that note as to say that why that's so important to everyone. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been great. I mean, it gives an insight into how you can look at this, not just from a passion point, but also kind of scale it up as a business and also the whole community aspect. Thanks, everyone, for doing this. And it's been great to have you on Advertising is Dead.
Thank you so much, Varun. This was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on board.
I hope you enjoyed that show. It's been a really fun week this week, as it is almost every week, but this week was particularly fun. Farmish Shahani was on Cyrus Says, great conversation over there. We had a crossover event. Vineet Kanabar, host of the Storytellers and Storytellers podcast, came on Uncle Please Sit. Really interesting conversation about the future of digital content. Besides that, it was the 50th episode this week of Agla Station Adulthood. Congratulations to Ritasha and Ayushi. But yeah, they're 50 episodes down. They had Rekha Jha as the guest on that show. On Advertising is Dead, Varun had the founders of Foxymoron, Suvir Bajaj and Pratik Gupta on. Another really, really interesting conversation. So full of interesting conversations this week, and I hope to see you again next week.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives, and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Story Sellers for personal stories, analysis, and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.